Okay, so I'm supposed to talk about emotion because that's what my research is on. But first of all, the title of my talk is Emotion and Depletion because, as you will see, that's my current thesis, is that emotion expressions, and in particular emotions expressed by other people, are actually depleting to people. But I think I can't start talking about emotion without commenting on how emotional this day is and this whole event is. I don't know about the rest of my peers here at Technion. In many ways, perhaps my peers in Israel. The idea that Mia is retiring, to me, is terrifying. It's like, Ido, we're the old people now. We're the senior responsible adults. There's no way that I trust you or me to be Dani or Mia. And so in many ways, to me, this has been a very depleting event. There are huge shoes to step into, and I'll just echo what Ido said yesterday when he opened the day we had honoring Dani's retirement, which is that don't you guys dare go anywhere. You stay right here. We need you here. You've been an inspiration, and we assume you will continue to be. That said, I'm going to try to get closer to here. I'm terrified of all this technology beeping at me. That said, the rest of my talk, I've sort of been thinking about it through the other talks. Since you're all supposed to now go to sleep, as we heard yesterday in Peretz Lavi's talk about sleep, my chore is to get you to wake up. It's not easy at 3 o'clock after lunch. I'm going to do my best. So I opened up by saying I'm very emotional. I am a very emotional person. That's why I study emotion. But I should also open with saying that there is a lot of controversy about whether there should be emotion in organizations. In fact, there shouldn't be. We should be rational. We should not let our emotions get ahead of us. Come on, Anat, make the rational decision, my colleague, my economist turned psychologist would say. And Dov was saying earlier that we cannot read artifacts. Well, I completely disagree with that. I think they're really easy to read. So you look at that, and who's the manager? Is he male or female? Is the manager male or female? Of course he's male. So we know who the manager is by the artifact of their gender, by the artifact of their tie, by the fact that they're sitting down. And the other person in the picture, more senior, more junior? Yeah, wishful thinking. Thank you very much. I'm glad you're retaining your optimism. I've given up in many ways. It's a she, and of course she's more junior, and she's saying, in case you can't read, oh, and by the way, your feelings has been trying to get in touch with you. Okay? Basically what she's saying is, hey, you guys, emotions do exist. You guys, you man, my manager, emotions do exist, and you need to recognize them, and you need to embrace them, and you need to let them exist in your behavior. Now, I kept thinking that there's no way Mia would ever say this, but she would manage to get this manager to realize there is emotions. She would never say it right out loud. And I think that's because she, and actually many of us are aware, Ed Locke was saying that emotion is problematic, nobody ever defines it. Well, people do define it, but they define very different things that they call emotion. There is this assumption that we organizational psychologists inherit from pure psychologists that emotions are reactions to something that happens to us. So I win a prize, I win the lottery, a paper gets accepted, once in a blue moon, and I'm delighted, I'm happy, I'm joyful. A paper gets rejected very frequently, I'm sad, I'm upset, whatever. But that's just one set of emotions. There are other emotions that we all inhabit, we all display, we all feel. There are emotions that come as a result of what we are supposed to feel. That's actually been really frustrating for me today, because on the one hand, here's this wonderful event, we have these international speakers, we have all these former students, I'm supposed to be happy. But on the other hand, Mia is leaving Anat, and so I'm feeling sad. Good, thank you, that was the right answer. I am confused about the feeling rules. What am I supposed to feel? And even worse than that, I'm confused about what am I supposed to display? Am I supposed to display sadness because, okay, you're not leaving, but you're retiring? Or am I supposed to display to other people that I'm really happy to see them? It's wonderful to see all of our graduates, my colleagues from abroad, and so on. So we have 3 different types of things feelings, if you will, what we feel in reaction to something that happens, what we feel in reaction to what we're supposed to feel, what we feel in reaction to what we're supposed to or allowed to show to other people, or as we call them, display rules. Now, there's also confusion about which emotions are good and which emotions are less good. So, for example, hate, good emotion or bad? Okay, it's like you're saying it's like a trick question. If she asks, she must know something that we don't know. But you really don't like it when people hate, unless you're a manager and your employees hate you and therefore do what you ask them to do. So what we have here, again, no gender effects, but who's senior, who's junior? The tie tells you he's senior, so these artifacts can be read, okay? And the junior man who's still a manager, he's a foreman, and this senior guy is telling him, hey, I hear the workers hate your guts, Bateson, keep it up. So hate has become a good quality for a leader. Not that he should hate, or she should hate, but that somebody should hate them has become a good emotion all of a sudden, which means it's all contextualized. Back to Ed Locke's, I see Ed's gone. No, you're here. Emotion is very contextualized, and what's good and bad is very contextualized and depends very largely on in what context are these emotions experienced. Same with aggression. Again, is aggression good or bad? Well, this is really not news to you. You will see it in very many employment ads. Wanted an aggressive salesman. You don't want aggression when you are in hospitals. Some of my students are studying aggression there. You don't want aggression in a children's play yard. Unfortunately, we see a lot of it. But somehow we do want aggression in marketing and sales. So we have a lot of confusion in what is good and what is bad. And the bottom line is that what is good and what is bad is a function of the context, is a function of the role. And the role, which is actually the set of, the role is, as we define it, is the set of expectations that we receive by virtue of having a particular responsibility in our workplace, carries with it some emotion feeling rules and emotion display rules. This particular cartoon is very telling because it regards the employee. Who's the employee here? Can you tell? Female or male? Female is the employee. She's a doctor, so whoever didn't give up was right to not give up. We sometimes do make it well ahead. She is also dressed, okay? She's very nicely dressed, sexily dressed, but she's dressed. She's looking at a non-dressed person. You probably can't read what it says down here, but it says, okay, Mr. Donnellan, now it's my turn. Sorry, screwed up the whole thing. Okay, Miss Donnellan, now it's my turn to examine you. So the patient is saying that to the doctor. What he's doing is breaking the role, if you will, but he's really getting at the fact that, hey, my embarrassment at being naked is a part of what I'm supposed to do. Your embarrassment or your discomfort at looking at a naked man, you're supposed to absorb that. Now let's flip it, and I will look at a naked woman, and you will look at a dressed man. So he's working around these emotions sort of implicitly. It's not being said. Let's not get too theoretical here, huh? Okay? There's actually a lot of research, and in fact, when I started out, I started out doing this research on emotion by introducing a concept called emotional labor. We actually called it emotional labor. I think that was wrong. I think it should be emotion labor. But what stuck is emotional labor, so that's the term we still see around. Emotion or emotional labor is the labor of displaying emotions that are required to promote organizational goals or by the organizational role. So in the case of the physician, the requirement is not to express any of her attraction, if you will, to the very sexy patient. And the patient's responsibility is to overcome the discomfort, the shame, the embarrassment of being undressed. Much more common, there is quite a bit of research on physician emotion labor. And that research leads to the very simplistic assumption, which is that what emotions are physicians supposed to express? Are physicians supposed to express emotions? No. So non-emotions. And this is actually, I gave a talk just a week ago at the Technion Medical School. This is an issue very much negotiated in the medical service industry. Should or shouldn't physicians express emotions? For various reasons, I will discuss a few of them. This gets problematic if they do. Much as we as patients would like them to express emotions, for various other reasons, it gets in the way of them doing their job. A much more common context, and in fact the one where most of the research has been done, is the customer service context. So we're in a way continuing Ben Schneider's talk on service, but we're going to take a sort of weird look at it. In the customer service context, there is the expectation that the employees be nice, friendly, and so on. And when you call in to complain about your cellular phone bill or whatever bill, the employee is supposed to tell you, if you're not completely satisfied, your money will be cheerfully refunded. Now this cartoon is playing with that by continuing and saying, as soon as we can find someone around here who's cheerful. So the money will be cheerfully refunded if we can find somebody who's cheerful. Notice that what it's doing, how I'm like tearing apart all these wonderful cartoons, right? Making them intellectual. Well, but that's the way to sort of really enjoy what we do. What it's doing is saying that the requirement to say cheerfully does not represent what I really feel. I'm just supposed to display that cheerfulness. This is the idea of emotion or emotional labor as we define it. The concept was introduced in the 1980s. This is when I started working on it with Bob Sutton. You can see this is a graph basically just measuring how many articles use that concept. From the 1980s, when we started working on it, this says 20s, all the way to 2010, 1,100, okay, 10,000 or 1,100 papers. 10,800 is the number. So we've had this influx of papers, and actually I disagree with Ed, who said that theoretical papers don't have an influence, but I fully agree that they do depend on some inductive work. Because really what happened, the thing that triggered all of this is some work that we did where we started being deductive, it didn't work, we became inductive, that explained things, that got everybody interested. So in a way that's a case study for your theory. What we also see is that this sort of expansion of work on displayed emotion parallels the growth of customer service and the service industry. This is basically saying the top line is the service industry, the bottom line is the manufacturing. Years are the same as you saw in the other graph. So as we see an increase in service, we also see an increase in research on emotion labor. Now notice this is not research on what people feel. It is research on what people are expected and or display in their work. We are not talking at this point about what people feel. Maybe we should, because the biggest rule, and as I looked at this graph, I thought that's so fit to Mia, because that's one thing Mia is really an expert at. Smile and be nice. I don't know how she manages it in all the committees and all the politics we have at Technion and elsewhere, but she's always smiling and always nice. And that's a rule that we assume is effective in interpersonal behavior and effective in customer service. That is an assumption that managers walk around with. Why? Because the assumption is that our goal is satisfied customers. And if we want satisfied customers, of course we should be nice to them. We should smile to them. That'll make them feel good. Well, the problem is this was the deductive work we did. We had this hypothesis. This is in the 1990s already. We had this hypothesis: if employees are pleasant, patient, nice, customers will be satisfied. It didn't work. Or at least it didn't always work. Why didn't it work? Because when employees are pleasant and patient and nice, customers have a feeling that they can play around and, oh, let's talk and let's take our time. And what does that mean for the customers behind us in the queue? It means the queue gets longer. And so what we have is, when employees are nice and there's no queue, works brilliantly. But most times, there is other people waiting in line, and the niceness and the pleasantness and the smiles generate an expectation that, as we call it, slow store norms. We can be slow. You might say it doesn't have to take time, but the actual fact of the matter is it does take time to be nice and pleasant and smiling. And so if our goal, along with customer satisfaction, is also efficiency, and actually when we look, what customers want is first efficiency and second pleasantries, we must tone down a little bit and go into neutral affect. As one of the people we observed, this is observations, not interviews, said, what a customer said to the employee when the employee said, "Hi, good morning, how are you?" And the customer said, "Don't bother me with good morning and how are you, just get me out of here." What is he saying? He's saying, I don't want this emotional labor. What I want is to buy whatever I came into the store to buy and to walk out of here. So he or she, and there's plenty of data showing that, is basically saying these displayed emotions may be functional in some cases. They're not always functional. They're not always desirable. And so when we talk about customers now, and we have customers waiting online, you can imagine, this is not going to happen to you, but you can imagine hearing, instead of "please wait online, we will be with you shortly," "You've been on hold for over an hour. Would you like us to put you in touch with a rage therapist?" Okay, we understand that you're upset with this waiting, with this frustration. Now, if we look at the rage of the customer, what's going to happen to the employee who ultimately gets to answer this customer? How is he or she going to feel? And this gets at the question of, do people in general feel legitimate to express or display certain emotions? So this is a stream of work that I did in several different studies, where we ask people, assuming you feel angry, would you display that anger? Following Mia's inspiration, we did it in 4 different countries to look at the cross-cultural differences, or at the cultural effects. So we do use the same methodology in the US, Israel, Singapore, and France. We actually had representatives of 3 of these 4 countries here in the lobby, although Michael Freese left to go back to. Yeah, he's here. Okay. But you weren't in Singapore then when we did this, I don't think. So we are asking people, assuming you feel anger, would you express it? But then we continue one step further and say, assuming you feel anger toward your manager, assuming you feel anger toward a customer, assuming you feel anger toward a customer service representative. So this is a service employee, we would call it in Hebrew, Oved Shirut. In English, CSR stands for customer service representative. And the answers people give us are basically, yes, I would, no, I wouldn't, on a scale. Okay, what is the probability that I would? Let's not get into the methodology. We dichotomize it, and we basically say percent of respondents who say, yes, I will express it. Now, we learn from here very interesting parameters. First of all, we learn that there is a very clear message about to who do I express anger? To who? The CSR, the customer service representative. So now you know who in society is the target of most of the anger. Now, if you interview customer service agents, and ask them, why are you leaving your job? Because that's an occupation with a huge turnover, they will say, because people yell at me all day. Here is your displayed emotion in action. Here are the costs or the depletion of these displayed emotion. We also learn a very interesting message about the role of customers in modern society. Look at what happens to customers and to managers between different cultures. Notice how similar they are. Israel is a little higher in terms of the manager, but these differences are actually not significant. This is to all of us Israelis who kick ourselves about how dugre we are and how honest we are, and we express everything that's on our mind until it has to do with our manager. And very interestingly, look at what happens with customer, Israel included. Nobody believes that they would express anger to a customer. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, that people do not express anger to our customer. Remember that what we have here is only data about what I think I would do. It may be processed through all sorts of self-presentations issues, social desirability, whatever it is. The mere fact that people think they should not express anger to a customer and that people in Israel are similar to Singapore, US, France, is very interesting. What we also see is a message that we read a lot about in the customer service literature, that customers are actually very similar to managers. They are the modern managers. People feel an affinity, people feel a responsibility in terms of their behavior towards customers. What this also means, as I said, is that the customer service representative is the target of a huge amount of anger. Now, I must tell you, we've looked at records, we've listened to transcripts of calls. It's not like every second call is an angry customer. This is where the bad is stronger than good plays out. Employees remember the angry calls, the angry customers, much more than the non-angry. There certainly is the effect of a lot of anger in the customer service occupation. This got me to asking, what happens when you have to handle other people's anger? And my prediction is that handling other people's anger, just dealing with it, just being in its context, is something that depletes you, that requires resources. Even though it shouldn't, it doesn't have to be. Other people's anger, we predict, leads to staff person, employees, depletion, and burnout. We study this in the context of customer service, but we've also studied, and what I'm going to tell you about is a little bit is about findings with customer service, but I don't think this is unique to customer service. I think this is a very fundamental dynamic that is true wherever we go. Just being in the context of anger, my sense is there's something very hardwired in us, evolutionarily hardwired. Anger is a message of danger, of threat. I should protect myself. All my resources go to that protection rather than to doing other things. So we developed a paradigm, and this is the paradigm. The paradigm is we have subjects. Subjects are sometimes students, sometimes employees of different sorts. These employees, these subjects, these participants, either read or hear a customer. And they either read or hear a polite customer who says, "Hi there, I'm trying to browse and it seems to like I have some problems. Most of the time I can't reach anything. Can you please help me?" Okay, this is a very inane customer. We call it calm. We can play around with the words a little bit more and we can say, how you doing? It's been such a nice day. I have some problems browsing. Can you help me? Or we can have a very rude customer who is responding, by the way. What you have on top is the employee. "Hi, I'm Eric. May I help you?" So these are, by the way, the two that I have here are taken from real calls. So this is real customers. What do you mean, hi? Like, who are you to say hi to me? I'm your customer. I've been waiting for half an hour. I want to disconnect from your lousy service. This, you agree with me, is an angry. Reviewers have argued it's not angry, it's rude. To be honest, I really don't care what you call it. It's a very hostile, negative message coming from the customer. And the questions that we ask is, assuming you're an employee exposed to this, as compared to an employee exposed to this, what happens to your feelings? What happens to your performance? First question, of course, because we have to justify ourselves to managers, is what happens to your performance? So here we have measures of customer service performance, as in these are the people responding to your calls, addressing whatever request you may have. Adjust my deal so it's the weekend deal instead of the weekday. Give me, I want free SMSs, unlimited browsing, whatever. In one case, the requests are neutral, so there's bland emotion in it. In another case, they are hostile. And what we see here is a bottom line performance level. Red, hostile, white, neutral. And you see how very clear the effect is. Meaning, when you're angry, what happens to the employee? He or she performs less well. Now this is paradoxical, because why are we angry? Because we think they will perform more well or better, right? So paradoxically, we think that by being assertive, by being angry, we command their attention. Well, we do. We command their attention, but it seems the attention goes to the emotion rather than to doing the task. And when we look at some other parameters, like questions like, you can see by the colors of the graph that this came off a different study, And again, we've done maybe 20 different studies with this paradigm, basically to show that the effects replicate and to look at different variables, different moderators. I can't see what that says. Okay. So when we look at exhaustion, how exhausted are you? Significantly more exhausted when the caller is angry than when the caller is pleasant. When we look at a bland question, one item, just like Ed Locke described, would you like a day off? After that intervention, we see significantly more requests from the angry than from the pleasant or the calm customers. If instead of looking at performances of the customer service requests, we look at a performance on something that's completely unrelated, a part of us would say, theoretically, we had thought that maybe this goes from a different energy pool. So we gave them this. This is from the Ravens matrices, fluid intelligence, if you will. We're not measuring intelligence. These are just questions that we thought would be very detached from the anger. But still, when we show people the angry situation, what we get is a worse performance, a weaker performance. Now here we have, this graph actually shows something else, or something in addition, because we play around here with the amount of angry calls. So we can have 0 angry callers, and employees perform 6 out of whatever it was, I think it was 8, correctly. When we add 1 angry person from these 3, from the total of 3, performance goes down. 2, performance continues to go down. 3, it yet continues to go down. So what we see here is the cumulative effect, okay? The cumulative effect of the more anger there is, the worse I am able to think. And what my theory would say is the more depleted the employee becomes by that presentation of anger. Again, the display of anger of the other person hurts the performance of something completely unrelated to the anger and unrelated to the customer presenting the anger. One interesting comparison is what happens, is it really anger or is it emotion? And this takes us back to the question of, should we really express emotion? Being a very emotional person, this is a very disturbing finding, but the finding is very clear. In this case, we added a condition. So we have superly positive employee, sorry, that's the blue. Superly positive is this employee, hi, how you doing? What a nice day. Are you having a good day or not? And then continues to the request. The white is, hi, my name is Michael Smith, and I need to do ABC. And the red is the angry. Now, what do we see here? The angry and the neutral are still significantly different. Significantly different. This is the same finding I showed earlier, the red to the white. The blue to the red are also significantly different. So when employees are encountering a pleasant customer, they still do better than when they encounter an angry customer. But notice what happens when the blue is compared to the white. What happens is the mere introduction of emotion, even if it's pleasant emotion, somehow intrudes into the employee performance. This is the beginning to explain why rationality says, don't bother me with the emotion. Let's be rational about it. Let's only think about the fact. Because it really is the case that the emotion intrudes into employees' performance. I have one more small story to tell you, but I think I will This is one small part of the story. In this case, instead of before I had 3 calls, now I have 11 customers. And what we see here is the graph of how long of a relief time employees need. And what you can see, white is the neutral, blue is the pleasant, red is the angry. Now what do we see? We see the effects that we've just seen. White is requesting the least relief from all of them. No neutral, no emotion, no relief. Blue, some emotion, is requesting a little bit more relief, but you'll see that it's very consistent. It's exactly a little bit higher all through the situation. The anger has a very clear upward trend. This is the turnover of the customer service employees, because 11 is half an hour for most of these employees. By the time they finish an 8-hour shift, they're dead. By the time they finish a year, they turn over, they leave the organization. Is this all managed? Well, this is the typical management. In case of emergency, break this glass, you'll feel better. Doesn't solve the problem, but gets management off the hook, I suppose. And with that, I can say thank you.